Hello, hi everyone, and many of you, welcome back to this class, Biblical Exegesis. This is the second one, so if you have not had the first one, you may have some trouble, but still, I think it's okay. Uh, and for 10 classes, we are going to deal with this topic of how to interpret the Bible. How to interpret the Bible. We did what is it? What is the exegesis? Meaning, what is a Bible interpretation? What is a study of exegesis has to deal with? And okay, let me briefly introduce myself, even though I've done it last semester. Yeah, my name is Hwang, as you can see, and I am a PhD doctor in international development, and I also did some doctoral studies on leadership with Dr. Clinton in Fuller Theological Seminary. I got my PhD from William Carey International University in Pasadena, which is a famous institution for training missionaries and global leaders. Okay, and I have been in the state doing ministry for the Korean American young people for last 20 plus years. Also, I have worked with a campus ministry called InterVarsity, which is pretty well-known organization globally and locally, and it's almost 170, I think, years plus organization. It's pretty old. And what else? I serve as a pastor in a Korean American church, and I teach in this Lordland college for the last couple years. Okay, so we are going to study about the Bible, but not the Bible itself, and how we are going to discuss how are we going to deal with the Bible and understand them. Okay, hold on a second. Let me get. Doing a research. This will be the chapter 1. And the things that we do, the biblical exegesis actually is a very academic thing. And so it's an academic effort, meaning you have to deal with the books and certain logical and rational processions, and need hard work. So it's not just a simple thing. It's a little complicated, but with those efforts, we are going to get something valuable. And the research is a scientific term. It's a scientific term. And let's see. So exegesis is a science, and it involves deep and very sincere research, and it's also an art. It involves some artistic part, but we'll more likely focus on the aspect of research than aspect of arts. So we are going to do some serious science. As we try to tackle and try to understand the Bible, Bible has been there for at least a couple thousand years, That's the New Testament. And another couple thousand years before Christ. So it's at least 3,000 to 4,000 years of a period it was written. So it's an ancient material, ancient book, and ancient documents. When we are dealing with the documents, any kind of documents, if you are trying to do the study of it, if you are trying to learn from those documents, there are several different ways to try to tackle any written documents. As I have told you in the last semester, last quarter, the Bible does have, it's been oral tradition, most of it, especially the Old Testament narrative. We believe it has been the oral tradition, and the Holy Spirit helped certain authors and the writers and copiers to be able to copy them into the manuscript. Manuscript means a copy of something else. So these are oral traditions, spoken words, mouth to mouth delivery and transition changed into a written document. Thus, what the written document does, it exactly records, not only it records, you can make a copies so another people can have same exact content. So the writing of the Bible is intended to maintain the exact accurate content. So these days we use the word contents a lot. And in a way, Bible is most read and most studied contents ever in human history. In spite of still the world going against religion and against spirituality, still the Bible is the number one document that is being printed year after year. And it's been translated into several thousand different languages. So it's popular, and people read it, whether you're a Christian or not. You study it as a highly respected document. Though you may not believe it as a word of God, as the Christians do, but still, there is certain value in studying the Bible. So, to approach, to study this content, most popular means or methods or modes of studying the Bible is certainly. So number one, people read. So by reading the Bible, you'll get a lot of information, and also, you will get the message, and you'll find out the meanings. So even without serious research or study, you are able to understand Bible. The intent of these studies are to understand the Bible. To understand it means you're going to find out the message, or a message or messages, and the meaning or meanings. So as we do the exegesis, let's not try not to forget. Our intention is to get the message and to find out what the true meaning is intended as the author of Bible, or authors of Bible, or the author of Bible, which is our Heavenly Father. He has or had intended for his readers or listeners. So, first popular study method is reading. Another popular way of approaching and dealing with the biblical contents is the sermons or preaching. So you go to church on Sundays, most Christians do, and as you sit in the worship and the pastor comes on or preacher comes on and he preaches, he gives a sermon to the congregation. The congregation sits there and learns from what the pastor has already learned. So it's kind of a pastor is a cook, he's a chef, and then he makes these meals for the people, just like in a restaurant, and they, prepare the meals and then give the dishes to the customers. So it's already ready-made, cooked to this certain recipe and given. So I mean, usually it's accommodates, appropriates the taste of the most customers, but it's not really customized. So that's the limit of the sermon. You cannot satisfy everyone, and your message is limited, so it can reach the majority of the congregation that are coming to the church. But the problem is, they are young from the old. They are men and women. They are married people and non-married people. Some are young in their faith. Some are old in their faith. So these are multiple different people. And you cannot always meet the needs and the concerns of these people who are sitting in a church every Sunday. So that becomes a very difficult task for a pastor to try to meet all the common needs. So it's always limited to the common needs, and that's the limit of the second means of study. For readings, the problem will be as you read, as you understand, your understanding is not checked, meaning you can go wrong in your understanding. You can go wrong on the understanding of the message, and there is no one to correct it, and you just read and read and read to yourself. That's why you may read the Bible like 100 times and you still may not get. You may get the message, but you can get the wrong message. So number 3, mood will be third means of study or approaching the biblical contents would be memorizing. If you're a church, if you've been a church for a long time, from childhood, you have this, memory of trying to memorize Bible verses, and they even have this contest of who memorized the most verses, or who memorized the verses most correctly. So there are like these contests, and then it helps you when you have issues and problems, and then the needs. These Bible verses that you have memorized, it comes out, and then it helps you in certain situations, and that's very useful tool. But you cannot memorize the whole Bible. You don't do that anyway, and you're only memorizing certain verses, and that's a limitation. But memorizing is a good tool to approach the contents of Bible. Then we have something called meditation. Meditation deals with just one or two verses, very little verses. Probably most would be 5 verses at the maximum. So it's a limited. And then you just go deep into those verses and the meanings, and then you try to meditate on it. And then as you meditate the verse over and over again, then you eventually get into the deep meaning of those verses, and then you also understand that the things that you may have not understood just by reading or through the sermons. So meditation is a good tool to go deep into the certain verses, and you don't always meditate along the narratives, but certain verses in the for example, Paul's letters, or Psalms. Psalms is a good book to meditate on. So meditation is a good method, and now we are going to do the research. So research is not the only way to understand the Bible, but it is one of the many different ways to study and learn the Bible. But exegesis is a good tool because you can go deep into it, and you'll find some message that is not usually discovered by reading, and also it is balanced, and you can check on it with some others' interpretation. And so as you do the research, you are going to read the interpretation of others that's been studied by great biblical scholars. So those are the advantage. Now, so doing a science. So we know that doing an exegesis means we are doing a science. Science can be interpreted in many different ways, but as I told you, always it is important to define the terms that we use. And in this class, I don't know about how others define, how they define outside this class, but in this class, science means getting a deep knowledge of a given subject or given topic. and it's a logical and rational way to tackle your problems and issues and questions. So that's the science. So science, basically, is a very logical and rational process. Anything that is a rational and logical process that can be tested and examined objectively, then it becomes a science. So science, as we use it, is not limited to the natural science or physics or chemistries, which usually people say when they say science, they mean these things, right? Engineering, chemistry, and physics. Yeah, those are the so-called natural science, something that's tangible and visible and deals with the topic of the nature or the makeup of nature. But as we use the science here, it means a serious study that is very objective. And so we are doing science. So as we do the science, we should mind these characteristics or core elements that constitutes or validates science as science. So not everything that people do or does is not a science. So you have to have certain category or parameters to be able to define science as a science. So first, research is defined. Research is a serious approach to a given topic. So anything can be serious approach to the given topic, utilizing very rational and logical means, including verified resources to come to a certain conclusion about the problem and issues or questions. So research basically deals with so any good research will have a certain given stated problem or issues or questions. So it could be one question, one problem that we are dealing with, or couple more. Okay. So research, it is a scientific way or academic way to resolve the problems and issues and questions. So what are the questions for the Bible biblical exegesis? The question is, what is the meaning and the message of a given text? And when we do an exegesis, we are not dealing with the whole Bible at one time. We are given a certain segment of Bible called passages. It could be a chapter, or it could be just one paragraph. So whatever the amount of contents are, we are given a text. So each research deals with a given text, but the question is always the same. what is the meaning? What is the message? Meaning and the message of a given text. So any exegesis is aimed to find the intended, the original message and the meaning of a given text. I said another parameter. Original and intended meaning. So when the Bible is given, I mean, we are reading it from like a couple thousand years later. But no matter who's reading it and where you are reading it, the Bible message is given with the original message and the original intent. And our goal as a researcher or a student of exegesis is to find out exact original meaning or exact the original intention of the author to the reader. So to do so, we need to understand the author, we need to understand the reader, and the situation surrounding the writing and the reading of those particular documents, especially when we are studying the letters from Paul or any other apostles to the church at the time. It is important to be able to understand the surroundings, the environment, and the situation that caused to write a certain particular letters to the church. So that's kind of idea that we are talking about. So it is key to try to tackle that original message, the original meaning which were given. And without understanding that you will not be able to make an exact application to our lives. So when exegesis is done, the whole purpose of doing exegesis is, number one, finding the original message. Then you should be able to apply that into your life context, to your own life. So that's for Christians. If you're not Christian, you are not asked or demanded to do so. But if you're not a Christian, you ask the question, okay, is this message is true? Is this the meanings that I find in this given text that I studied, does that have any implication to me? Is there any truth in it? So if you decide it is true, I mean, no matter what you have been taught, whether within your own religion or whether you're within your own the culture or government, those teachings does not mean anything. Once you find the truth, we are going to abide by, live by the truth. That's what Christians are. That's why there are many Christians in China or North Korea who are suffering, willingly suffering from all those persecutions and imprisonments, because they found the truth. Truth, you can give your life for the truth, because that truth tells and deals with your life. So your life matters. It doesn't matter. And the truth, it talks about who we are and what our destiny is. So basically, when we study the Bible, that you're going to end up with the message telling about what the life is about. That's the truth. And why are we here on earth? So that's a very, very question that we are going to ask and trying to find that answers. Because Bible claims that it gives you the answers to these important so-called ultimate questions. So the research is clear. The objective of research is clear. It is to find the message and the meaning from the Bible. And you may have a certain need that would arise into problems and issues and questions. I just gave you an example. What is the meaning of life? And why am I here? What should I do to be a true human being? So, or the question would be, the problem would be, what is the truth? What is truth? So these are the questions that you would have in your mind, because Bible certainly deals with those questions, because Bible is so-called is the ultimate book, the ultimate book. So research is defined. Number 2, logical and rational. Any research, whether you're dealing with a natural subject or the social studies, social science, or psychology, all these academic efforts, they have these elements of being logical and being rational. Logical means it follows the logic of science. Logic of science says this is a rather simple logic, but basically, when you have a problem, you have questions. Then with the questions, people usually have certain assumptions, or you may not have an assumption. That's okay. And then you do the search, trying to find the answers, or quest, or investigation, whatever you call it. You do it, trying to resolve the problem. Then you come and into the conclusion, and these conclusion needs to be so these are some of the elements that your conclusion has to be logical and rational. It has to be validated, meaning make it objective, and verified, pretty similar thing. And it should be able to duplicate, especially in natural science, duplicate by others, and then confirm. And then there's another term. Okay. So rational means simply defined, commonly accepted. Commonly accepted. So anyone with a proper mindset and the proper understanding of the subject would agree to the conclusion that you or your group has found out. So you find out the conclusion, and people need to agree. The majority of people need to agree. They need to conform, and thus make it rational. Meaning, it makes sense. It makes sense, and it is acceptable, and it does say the facts. So I spelled out this word. This is a key word, key term for doing a science which is logical and rational. Something to be logical and rational, you're not dealing with imagination. You're not fabricating. You're not doing the like a fictional things. It has to be based on the facts. Facts are the key to doing a science. So your research, as you make an assumption and do the search is trying to accumulate all the facts regarding the question. And as you gather all the facts, what we do is analyze those facts. Some of the facts, so-called facts, are not really facts. It's the fabrication, or it's a false statement. So you exclude those false statement or fact, the false, the imaginations or fabrications. Then you come up with true facts. So that's the process of verification. So you need to verify what you have found. And the question is, does these things these things that I found out, are they really facts or not? So you just gather all these facts and may come up with a conclusion to your problems and your issues or your questions. So that's the process of science. This process is applied to the biblical contents, the writings. So there's a word validity and reliability. Your conclusion after the search need to be, again, has to have validity by this. And reliability means you can trust certain findings or conclusion. So another word for conclusion might be I'll use these terms quite often in this class. So your conclusion and your findings, these are something that you write down as a result of your science, your research, and those need to be validated, and it has to be reliable. Reliable means you can trust. So if it's irrational, then your conclusion or findings are reliable. If it's not rational or irrational, then we can say it's not reliable. You cannot trust the findings. When we are doing a science, we basically have two different approaches. It is important to understand these two approaches, whatever the science that you're doing. It's not limited to the study of Bible, but it is general, universal, the lesson or the terms as we do the so-called science. One is inductive and one is deductive. Majority of the science that we do at the school, as you are being educated in an elementary level, and then junior high, then high school level, would be more deductive than inductive. But the American colleges and universities, they demand this science that is more inductive than deductive. So let me try to explain these two terms, because these are key terms and key concepts for doing any kind of science. Most deductive studies begin and start with a given conclusion or given finding. So it has a so-called statement. And this statement says A is B, for example. And your job as a scientist or researcher is to come up with the proof. And your job is trying to prove why this statement is true. Why is it rational and logical? So that's the inductive. That's the deductive. Sorry. Okay. Let's continue. Sorry about that, the interruption. Okay, we are discussing these two different approaches to a science. The deductive, again, it means that you have a given conclusion, and you're trying to support this statement or conclusion or finding that is given to you. So, for example, in the Bible, something doctrine called the Trinity. It says, the Trinity means there's one God, but this God is in three persons, and the three person is exactly the same God in one. So it is difficult concept, and say it is given, and the students of Bible are trying to support this idea, the concept of Trinity from all the resources. and you come up with a conclusion. Thus, we did all this research. So what we are trying to find is the supports and the proofs, support and proof from the Bible or even the extra Bible, the outside the Bible, and come up with the finally with the same. Agree or this. So your conclusion can be I agree or either I disagree. So that is how the deductive process works. So this is more like a closed conclusion. And you either agree or disagree as the result of the study. That's the deductive method. And exegesis, on the other hand, it is not trying to disprove or prove a given statement or given conclusion or given findings. The inductive is very different approach than deductive. Inductive approach of science begins with a open conclusion. It doesn't have any suggestions. You may have something called assumption or theory. So you have a something called assumption or assumptions, or a theory, or another word, thesis. Thesis is a statement when you do a dissertation, but usually let's call a theory. So you have a certain theory to your problems or your questions, and your job is try to prove that assumption or theory, or even you do not have any theory or any assumption and you are going to try to develop a conclusion to the given question or problem. So that is something called inductive. So open-minded research. So open science is inductive and rather closed science is deductive. And the biblical exegesis is what? It is an inductive approach. So with these assumptions, search, investigation, study, whatever you call it, you do this. It's a time-consuming and it takes much effort. And then or findings. So you come up with a certain conclusion or findings, after the search. So this is a very basic concept of two different approaches. So you got the inductive and deductive. Again, exegesis is an inductive approach to the Bible. We do not have a conclusion. We do not know whether the Trinity is true or not. And, your verses may not deal with, not even deal with the issue of Trinity. So, your answer is not Trinity. Your answer is the message and the meaning in a given text. There are basic three steps when you are dealing with any search or research. So once you have these assumptions or questions, the problems, then you're doing the search. And when the passage is given to you, there's a given text in the case of exegesis. First thing is observation. Second step is interpretation. And third, application. These three steps apply to any good science, but especially if you're doing like a sociology, social science. Observation, interpretation, and application is very key to doing sociology. Same thing with the psychology. For example, Freud is a famous psychologist who did the analytic study of psychotic issues. He has observed many patients throughout his practice as a psychologist, and then he kind of builds up this theory, saying, their psychological issues may have something that has to do with that is behind, hidden, underlying conscience, and he called it as self-conscious. And then actually he did examine his patients again and again and find out his theory is more true. And so he can support his theory with his own clinical data and examination and experiences. And he did document all these things that can be used as his data, and he sums up and comes with a conclusion. And so there's a theory of Freud. So all the science involves observing whether it's a patient or a phenomenon, and then making an assumption, and then to make an interpretation of those data, and then come up with a certain theory or conclusion or rules or principles. So that's how we do the science. We'll go further into these three steps, because these are the three steps that we are going to apply when we do the actual exegesis. So I'll just introduce. Observation is seeing things and observing things, whether it's phenomenon or document, and then you interpret those document, the texts that are difficult to understand at the first glance. So reading, if the reading would not resolve, and if you cannot come up with a message and meaning, and the meaning is not clear or is complex, or it takes some more steps to understand the exact true meaning, then you apply this interpretation. Then there is a process of doing the application, the actual work of. So that application is, different from the natural science to our exegesis. But application basically is the common term that is used. Now we will go into the research brief. Brief look at the research, because we are not professional scientists. You are not like a professional Bible scholars, but still there is a certain framework that is basic and given to doing research. So without understanding this basic the framework of doing a research, you may not be able to get the whole concept of doing exegesis. Research involves these functions or these tasks. So these are if you are a researcher, whether it's a biology or whether it's sociology, whether it's a Bible, one has to do these things to be a good researcher. And let me introduce each one of them. Number one, you must identify the problems. So when you're trying to do a let's say master's dissertation, writing a master's dissertation, first thing that a professor requires for you is to write out your problems or research questions. So that's very key and important, because you gotta know what you are trying to find, or you gotta know what you're trying to prove. And if you don't have that clearly written, then you will be confused throughout whole research. So know your problem and exactly. Usually the problem with this problem or the research question is that people are not clear, very vague. Many use this the abstract concepts. In science, you are dealing with the facts. And your problem and the research question has to be factual. You cannot use abstract words or concepts when you're trying to identify your problem. So it has to be exact and it has to be narrowed down. But the problem with doing biblical exegesis is that you start without knowing what your problem is. Only the question that you are starting with is what is the true and intended, the meaning and the message of this the original author. So that would be the general question that you start with when you do the biblical exegesis. And then as you do the observations, let's go back. See, as you do the observation, as you read, and then the questions rise, the problems arise. So when you're done with the observation, you will have several, at least one or more questions regarding the given passage or given text. So, as you read and you're trying to, as you read, you're trying to identify this problem. Then you would have rational further research. This may not apply to the biblical exegesis, but most research that you do, it requires certain rational, whether it's personal reason or whether you're trying to contribute to a certain field and add a knowledge to it. You are going to you're presenting the rational, the reasons, the cause for the given research, and it has to be accepted by that academic community that you are in. And some people do the research and study for a very odd reasons, and you can do that, but it's not going to be accepted by your colleagues or your community of that the given field. So rational is you're presenting the research problem and say this is why important. This is why it is important for me to study this particular issue or problem or question. And then you need to be approved. So most good science does have certain authority or mentor or guiding person, the authority over you. Same thing with a biblical study. You need to have someone who oversees your research, your exegesis. It could be your pastor, it could be your Bible leader, or someone who is mature in faith. So it is important to have, number 2, rational further research. Number 3, goal or goals, objective. Goal or goals and objectives, these not only clarify the problems, it says the goals and the objectives, it's expectation of the findings. What are you specifically expecting from the given study? So that's called goals and objectives. So you write down and clearly state what your goals and objectives are. This is something that I expect to find from this given study and research. So those are called goals or objectives. And then we have assumption and theory. I already talked about this assumption and theory. So sometimes, not always, but sometimes you kind of have the idea about the conclusion and the finding. I think I'm going to find this at the end. I think this is the answer to the question that I have. You're not certain, you have no proof, but you have a kind of suggestion about the possible answers to the question and problems that are given to you. In that case, if that's the case, then we have something called assumption or a theory. And you write them down, the assumption and theory and possible answers, or answers. When you do that, you have a good assumption and theory. So these are the elements that are involved in the research one. Okay, I think that time's up, and we'll continue this topic in the next class, next week. So thank you for listening, and thank you for your efforts to try to understand, and I'll come back and see you guys next week. Bye.